Good morning, Kelly. How are you?
I am so good. How are you doing?
Good. I'm cold today. Just
Oh,
keeping it real. Um, I don't live in as cold of a place as you do, but it is definitely that spring winter still, where we're not quite into that warm weather.
yeah, like 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yeah, yeah. Like
Mhm.
I still got to wear my winter coat, but it doesn't need to be. I have a heated coat, and the heated part doesn't need to be on, but I still need my winter coat.
Okay, but tell me, how does that work? A heated
Amazing.
coat?
Yeah, yeah,
Wait, I
yeah.
live in Minneapolis. Maybe I need this.
You need this if you have not heard of this before.
No.
Although I did hear, I was listening to your spring equinox. How do you say that?
Yeah. Equinox, yeah.
And you were talking about like the long coat that goes,
Yeah, it's vest
mid-calf.
season now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, that's probably just as good as a heated coat, but essentially it's battery run. So I just have two batteries. I keep one charged while the other one is in my coat, and then at the end of the night I swap them out. And so I always have just like this personal heater running.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna look into this for next year though.
You need to.
Yeah, I'm into it.
It's been a game changer. But yeah, so just to be honest, like I'm cold today. I've got my space heater under here. I've got my blankie. I've got but anyway, how are you doing today?
I am good. It is actually nicer here today. I took my plants for the first time outside for a little outside sunshine
Whoa.
time. I know it's maybe in like the 50s, which for us is like
Yeah.
summer. Yeah, it feels like
It's
it.
yeah. Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
get that.
so it's
That's
good.
good.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
the birds
cool.
are chirping. And that's like one of my favorite parts when you can hear, because where do you live?
Well, so I live in Washington State. I'm,
Oh,
Eastern Washington.
I
Um,
love,
yeah, so I don't think we get as cold as you do, but we get
yeah.
cold. It's
You get
cold.
cold. Yeah, we definitely get like the birds leave and then they come back. And so then when you get those days where it's like, oh, you open like letting the dog out and you like
Yeah.
hear the birds outside and you're just like, oh, they're back.
Yes.
And you just know it's like that
Spring is
hope.
coming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Kelly, let's have you. We just started talking and like people don't even know who you are. So, can you introduce yourself?
Yes. So I am Kelly Smith. I'm an E-RYT 500 and a YACEP. All of that just means I have studied yoga for a lot of hours and I have taught for a lot of hours. And I'm also a author and meditation teacher and the host of the podcast Mindful in Minutes and Meditation Mama. So I like to take the idea of meditation and break it down into really easy, simple, this is what you need to know. This is how you practice it. And my whole goal in life is to just make people's lives a little bit better by either helping them connect to their truest self or by slowing down and just giving them tools for their toolbox so that we can all be a little happier, just a
Hmm.
little calmer, and a little more connected to who we are.
Yeah. Which I'm going to talk about this in a minute, can help with healing too,
Mhm.
like big time.
Definitely.
Um, but before we talk about that, I'm curious, like, because I've been listening to your podcast for about a year now. I found you about a year ago. And so I'm just curious, like, how did you get here? Like, what led you down the path of yoga and meditation? And like, tell me the story.
I started with yoga when I was young. Like I couldn't even drive. My mom had to drive me to my yoga classes. And I was always an athlete. So I did it for like cross training for my sports. And I was
Okay.
like, I'm here for the stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a Shavasana skipper. I'm reformed. I'm a reformed Shavasana skipper. If you're unfamiliar with what that means, it means at the very end of a yoga class where you like lay there, the teacher's like, come to your final pose Shavasana and you
Yeah.
rest. I
My
would just
favorite
get
part
up. Okay. Well, 14-year-old me was like,
was no.
what is this baloney? I'm out of here. And I would just roll up my mat and just walk out the door and like go be like, well, my mom isn't picking me up for 6 minutes. I could go run on the treadmill a little bit. And I was totally just sort of missing the plot in a way as
Yeah.
to what the point was. But that's where I started. And then I was a little bit older now, 16. My mom was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer,
Mm,
and she's still with us now. So this has a happy ending.
good.
But it was during that time that I was really introduced to like some of the softer sides of yoga. Her oncologist talked about, visualization and relaxation. Relaxing breath is really good for your white blood cell count. And I was one of her main caregivers at the time. And so we kind of dabbled and explored in these things. We'd do a little gentle movement. We'd maybe breathe, maybe visualize some things. And it just really inspired me. And I remember my mom being like, "You're good at this. Maybe you should do it." And
Mm.
I was like, "Mom, that's not a real job." So, I was 16. I was like,
Yeah.
that's not a real,
Heck
people
no.
don't do that. And this is also, I'm almost 35 now. So I guess it was almost 20 years ago. People definitely
Yeah.
weren't full-time yoga and meditation teachers, not just regular old like Minnesota girls. So I still did all the things, checked the boxes, went to college, got a piece of paper that I don't use. And when I graduated and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, I was like, I'm going to take a yoga teacher training.
Hmm.
And I did that and it just felt so good and I loved it. And yoga and meditation were such a life raft for me in those trickiest times that I was like, I
Mm.
want to be that for other people. Like I want to be
Hmm.
that teacher that helps like lift people up in that way and shares this thing that I love. And I worked in management and taught yoga on the side. And then when my husband, almost husband at the time, got into medical school, we moved to a one bar, one Walmart town in Missouri. And I found
Amazing.
it, you know what, if that isn't true support for someone else's dream, I don't know
Right.
what is.
Yeah.
And I guess actually there were a couple of bars. They had like their priorities right.
That's fair. Yep.
Even the smallest town, I feel like has at least
Oh
like two
yeah.
bars minimum.
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
gotta. You have to have options.
You do, you do. And so we moved there. I had to leave my job, my friends, my family. I was just unemployed. My husband was always in school. It was just me and the dog Mila, who was a puppy. And I was just like, I have no job and a lot of time on my hands. So why not try to pursue my dream? And I
Hmm.
started teaching yoga classes there at his med school and working all these odd jobs to like pay the bills. And it started growing and growing and growing. And I ended up opening a yoga studio there,
Oh, cool.
which was a really cool experience. And so even
Yeah.
though I, say this one bar, one Walmart town is actually a really special place in my heart. And
And one yoga
when
studio.
and one yoga studio, yes. And so when I left and I had to sell the studio and my husband, we moved again for another part of medical school. I wanted to find a way to stay connected to my students back in Missouri. We were going to Michigan because for some reason I only get sent or live in M states. So we went Minnesota to Missouri to Michigan, and then after Michigan, eventually back to Minnesota. But I wanted to stay connected with them. And I'd kind of developed this signature of doing these guided meditations
Hmm.
at the end of certain classes. My students
Okay.
really liked it. And I was like, and I'd been doing yoga teacher trainings. There were teachers there to like teach yoga classes, but I didn't feel like there'd be anyone doing that. So I thought, okay,
Hmm.
how can I create these classes, these meditations, and share them online? This was
Hmm.
like 8-ish years ago. And so I was like, I don't know. I just started getting into podcasts and I was like, maybe I'll just set up a podcast feed. And at the time, the hardest thing about podcasting was getting people to figure out what is a podcast and how do you
Hmm.
listen.
Yeah.
And so I would just sit in like the spare bedroom in our little townhome in Michigan and record these meditations that I was writing and put them on this podcast feed, just thinking it, my students back in Missouri could listen to them.
Hmm.
And it was growing like a little bit, it would grow and it would grow. Not anything crazy. And then we moved again and we ended up in Minnesota. And then March of 2020 hit. And I remember
Mm.
so much happened. I mean, March of 2020, we all,
Yeah.
we we all know her. We all know what was going on then. And I just found out that I was pregnant with my first child, who I call Pork Chop, which is not their birth name, but their internet nickname. So I
But still
just found
super
out.
cute.
I thank you. I just found out I was pregnant with Pork Chop, like new pregnant. And at the time I was only like traveling, doing these pop-up trainings, continued ed trainings, things like that. My husband was in residency in the ICU. And I was like, okay, I'm pregnant, like so sick.
Mm.
Flights were grounded. So I was like, I just had to clear. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do for work. Um, all these things, so many what ifs that we were all dealing with. And every week I would keep track of my podcast downloads in a spreadsheet. I love a spreadsheet. And so I was like, okay, one foot in front of the other, try to stay in your
Hmm.
routine. So it was Monday. So I was filling out my spreadsheet and I thought there was a mistake in the download numbers because I maybe get a few thousand every week, which like I'm really proud of. I
Yeah.
remember in one week, that first week, I got 250,000 downloads in a week. And
Holy.
I
Oh
know.
my
And I was
gosh.
like, what is happening. And
Yeah.
I was like, there must be like some mistake. And I checked it so many times and it was
Yeah.
not a mistake. And because we were all inside, my life's never been the
Yeah.
same since then. I certainly don't, every week get a quarter of a million downloads by any
Yeah.
means, but everyone was at home looking for what I'd already been creating for
Yeah.
years. And they just happened to be at home, anxious, scared, just like I was, looking for free resources
Yeah.
to support themselves. And I'd already been doing it for almost 3 years at this point. So there was, whatever, like over 100 guided meditations.
Mhm.
And it completely changed my life because
So
all of these
grateful.
people
Yeah.
discovered the podcast and yeah, the trajectory of my life completely changed in that moment. And it was one of those things that I just felt so grateful and was like, thank
Mhm.
you, universe. I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? I was
Mhm.
like, this little
Yeah.
thing that like hardly anyone was listening to is, totally changed. Um, but yeah, and then the journey just continued on this new path. And I've been so grateful to be able to do what I love and also be the parent that I want to be.
Mhm.
Um, also, having a pandemic pregnancy and then,
Mhm.
pork chop was born, before vaccines and things like that. And so I needed something for me. So many other parents
Yeah.
weren't as lucky as I, where you have something where you can be flexible or you can do it, fit it in little places here and there. And so I love what I do. And I'm also so grateful for it. And
Yeah.
it's really kind of woven itself nicely into my new life as a mom.
Yeah. Because now you have 2 kiddos.
And I have two, Pork Chop and
Yeah.
Poppy, 4 and 1.
Oh, so fun.
Mhm.
They're so little still.
They're so little. I know. How old are yours? I
Yeah. Oh
forget.
my gosh. 24, almost 16, 13, and 7 and a
Ooh,
half.
whoa. Oh
Yeah,
my
so
gosh.
we're
Wow. Yeah.
feel like the days of a 1-year-old are so long ago.
You know what, though? Every single season, and I haven't made it to the season that you're in yet, but it's like there's so many beautiful parts and also
Yeah,
challenging parts. And I imagine that just continues for forever, no matter what age
absolutely.
you're at.
Yeah.
They have their beautiful parts and like their challenging parts.
Yeah, like I don't know that I could say I have a favorite age because every age has something that's so fun. Like
Mhm.
even my 24-year-old, like
Yeah.
there's fun things about having an adult child and then there's hard
Mhm.
things about having an adult child.
Right.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Parenting is just an adventure, right?
It it is, and it is such a lesson in letting go of control.
Oh my gosh, yes. That's so hard. I feel like I was just saying that to one of my kids, like, I really want to control you and make you wear your coat today. So I'm just putting that out there. And she was like, I don't want to. Okay, well, just so you know, I really want to
Yeah.
control you right now, and I'm not going to.
Yes, in my household, it's just so you know, mom would be choosing something different, or mommy would be making a different choice. This is, of course, my 4-year-old, which,
Yeah.
they're have so many opinions. I was like, "But I respect the choice you're making."
It's so good. I know.
Yes.
We just got to name it. Like, I just need you to know this is
Just
not
so
what
you
I would.
know. Yeah, I would be doing something differently, and I'm not gonna say I disapprove of your choice, but certainly I wouldn't be making your choice.
That's right. That's right. So funny. Well, I would love for you to share more with a lot of our listeners are parents. And I try to put information out there that's trauma informed. So I just know that a lot of my listeners also are foster or adoptive families as well, or parents who have kids with, different needs, maybe a little neuro spicy. So, I just would love for you to talk more about like how does yoga and meditation help with not only us as parents staying regulated, staying calm, because if we're not calm, we can't give that energy to our kids, right? And that's important. But also like with our kids, like a lot of our kids, have experienced adversity that has affected how their brains work and how they feel in their bodies. And I just know that yoga and meditation can help with that. So, however, you want to start that conversation, I would
Yeah.
love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. So I think I want to start with how it supports us as the parents and the
Yeah.
caregivers, because I think that's really the first piece. We can't expect our kids to do something we can't do ourselves.
Hmm.
And everything I'm about to say, I also like to do the caveat of like, please don't hear this and think that I'm like this perfectly calm parent all the
Right.
time because I'm certainly not. And
Yeah.
we are human beings. Being a parent, being a caregiver is hard. Regulating ourselves is hard, especially if you have a child that maybe needs, has like extra needs or is
Mhm.
really needing your support in that time. You're a single parent or just the
Oh,
primary
yeah.
parent.
Mhm.
I run into that a lot just because, my husband works in healthcare. So his work is very demanding with no flexibility. So then that
Mhm.
often means that then I have to have all the flexibility.
Yeah.
And so don't hear everything I'm about to say and be like, Kelly's household must be so peaceful all the time.
Right.
No, it's not.
It's
I'm just
not.
speaking. It's not. No one's is. So I want to
No one.
just take that pressure off right
Yeah.
now. But with all of that said, something that I've learned for myself through experience is you can't expect your kids to do something you can't do yourself. And
Mhm.
often that just looks like self regulation is the biggest piece.
Mhm.
And my kids are little, so they're still in the state of having to co regulate. They really
Yeah.
can't self regulate yet. And how can I co regulate with them or model regulation if I can't find it in myself? That's
Mm.
one piece. And so when we do things like yoga, mindful movement, but especially meditation that helps to soothe our nervous systems, truly like regulate our nervous system. Both of these practices, yoga and meditation, are very good for the nervous system. If we're experiencing that nervous system dysregulation and dysfunction, which you would know better than I would, Melissa, but I feel like almost everyone has like
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you live in like a
Absolutely.
modern day
Yes.
life, you're probably either moderately overstimulated, anxious, depressed,
Yep.
or have like some nervous system struggles or all the above
All
or a
of the above.
combo. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we can't expect our kids to just magically whip up these skills that we don't have. So therefore we can't model for them. So that's
Yeah.
the first thing. Also, it's so cliche to say, like, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I don't really like that one. But what I
Mhm.
do like saying is you show up as the parent you want to be when you yourself are cared for. And if
Yeah.
you're just giving, 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 a friend of mine describes it as, we're both moms. So she used the word mom, but whoever the, primary caregiver is like the power bank that everyone puts their charger cords
Mm.
into.
Mhm.
And so then if your battery is completely empty and people are trying to say, no, charge up my battery,
Yeah.
charge up mine, and yours is empty, it's like, what do we
You have
do? We
nothing
need
more. Mhm.
nothing to give. And so not only is it important that we care for ourselves, just for our own well-being and our own care so we can show up as the parent that we want to be. No one wants to yell at their kids. No one wants
Yeah.
to get snippy with their kids. I still do it sometimes.
Yeah.
I'll be like, "Kids, enough." Or I'll go, "Mom needs a break."
Yeah. Yeah.
It happens, but no one it's not like I wake up in the morning being like, "You know what I'd love to do? I'd love to get
Yeah.
super overstimulated by you guys using volume 9,000 and like trying to murder each other all day long."
Yeah.
And so then
And then
finally
yell
I'm
at
like,
you.
I
Yeah.
know, yeah. So then they're louder, louder, louder. So then I'm just like, stop it. No one wakes up being like, that's what I'd love to
Yeah.
do today for my kids. So I think it's important that we support ourselves. Also, when we teach ourselves how to regulate, we'll then have more tools in our toolbox to not only model that for our kids, but
Mhm.
especially if you have little ones, that's the biggest thing. People say, how do I get my kids into meditation? And there's a lot of different games you can play. I have a book called Meditation for the Modern Family, which is like
Oh,
just tons
cool.
of practices that you can do.
Okay.
I'll send you a copy, Melissa. I'll get you one.
Oh
You
my
can
gosh,
check
I
it
would
out.
love that.
Yeah.
So
And
yes.
but it has, it answers that question. It has tons of different practices, things like that. But the crux of it is when your kids are really little, first thing to do is model them because
Yeah.
they pretty much think everything you're doing when they're like under 7 is like super cool. And then
Yeah.
they're curious. And then you've opened the conversation, fun little games, things like that. For your adolescent aged kids, really talking to them about like the why. And so when they come to you and they're starting to experience anxiety, right? We know our kids are more
Mhm.
anxious than they've ever been before. We know our
Yeah.
kids are also more stressed, overbooked or overscheduled, things like
Yeah.
that. Even overstimulated with their devices. When they start coming and telling you these things, you can talk about meditation or even some gentle yoga and how it helps you to not feel that way. And then you've kind of opened the door with them. A lot of times that age is like the why. It's not just
Yeah.
like, oh, mom's doing that. And that's kind of cool. So like maybe I want to do that. When they're adolescents, they're like, mom, like I feel really anxious, or they might be getting more into sports, be like, I'm having a hard time
Mhm.
in my sport or focusing or building up my confidence, things like that. And then for your teenagers, they're just like little adults. And so you kind of just have to be like, hey, I was thinking about this thing and just thought it might be interesting. Or like, hey, I just recently heard about like meditation and I'm just dabbling into it. Do you know anything about it? And I
Mhm.
feel like that's kind of the best approach for like your older kids
Totally. Yeah.
to just, put it in their lap and be like,
Yeah.
whatever, do. And then if they're like, oh, I don't know. And then just be like, oh, like a lot of people, a lot of teenagers do listen to mindful minutes as well. And just be like, oh, I don't know. Like I listened to this podcast and she just does guided meditations. And like there's some sleep ones. I know you mentioned you're having a hard time sleeping. I'll just send you the link, and kind of just
Yeah.
very like pressure. It kind of has to be their idea.
Totally.
But yeah, for the caregiver, it's like first you have to care for yourself,
Mhm.
just period. We all do, but like when you're a caregiver, like that is so freaking hard
Yeah.
and draining, and you're giving everything that you have to other people. And so even finding these little moments to be able to give back to yourself in this way. And the last thing I'll say on how this can help support this is just from my own personal experience, two things. One, um, really focusing on my meditation practice helped me reduce my postpartum anxiety the second time around. I had a really severe postpartum anxiety with pork chop, which like I
Okay.
understand it's kind of ironic being like you're a meditation teacher and you had postpartum anxiety, but you get the right cocktail of hormones, sleep
Yeah.
deprivation, and like I got into meditation because I was like an anxious person anyways. You get that right
Yeah.
combination together and it's going to happen. But it really, really helped to support a different outcome the second time around postpartum. So there's that. If you have any kind of either like postpartum anxiety, maternal anxiety, things like that, it can be really
Yeah.
supportive for that. And also, it's really helped me connect to my intuition. It helps me cut through the noise. So, when there's all of this, we were chatting a little bit before I hit record, but right, there's all this noise out there. You do like one thing, and everyone has a million opinions about what you're
Mhm.
doing. And half the people will say this is the best thing you can do for your kid. And the other half is like, how
Yep.
dare you? That's so dangerous for your kid. And there's just a lot of noise. And so, being able to practice what I consider intentional introspection, which is what meditation is. It's
Mhm.
single pointed concentration and then intentional introspection. I'm able to bring those questions to myself. What should I do? How do I
Mhm.
really feel about this?
Mhm.
What in my heart feels best for my kid? Um, why am I actually feeling this way? And being able to quiet the mind enough. Meditation isn't just having no thoughts, it's being able to kind of turn the volume down a little bit, turn
Yeah.
inward, and bring those important questions to whatever you want to call it, the true self, the soul, your highest self, whatever you want to call it. You can insert
Mhm.
your word for it there. And bring those really important questions when sometimes you feel lost, you can bring them to that important part. And that's really been helpful for me.
Yeah. That's good. Well, I love all of that. I think that speaks to how, I work with a lot of families who, prior to parenting their kids, who have the laundry list of, all the letters, all the diagnosis, right? Um, that they felt like they were a different person back then, before, right? And that parenting kids from hard has really changed them. But I think that it's the worn out nervous system, and I feel that too, right? Like I
Me
feel
too.
that, yeah, like the more worn down my nervous system is, the worse I feel, which means the worse I give to my kids and my husband and even my friends. And like, I just want to lay in my bed and not give anything to anyone. But these are like simple practices we can do that don't, like, I don't have to get up and start training for a half marathon. I don't have to completely, change, and I don't have to become a vegan. I don't have to, nothing wrong with vegans, but
Yeah.
like I don't have to like completely change how I eat or, my lifestyle. I can just add in these little short baby step
Super
practices,
short. Yeah, even
right?
like 8 minutes a day, they say is enough to
Yeah,
get the physical, mental, emotional benefits. And even if you do 5 minutes a day, that's way better than
better
0
than
minutes a
nothing.
day. I
Yeah,
think of it as like an Instapot or like a pressure cooker, right? It's there's the pressure, 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 and then you have to do that little like release valve at times and like
yeah.
let some of the pressure go. And I think that like, at least for me, one of my toughest things is when I get really dysregulated and like overstimulated, I just get like a little snippy.
Hmm.
That's my particular brand of when my nervous system is like not working well, I'm just like get on edge and get snippy. And so I'm like, okay, I need to like alleviate some of this pressure. Like I need to
Mhm.
kind of let some of that like let it go. And so even these short little, even just like, hit the pause button, few deep breaths.
Yeah.
Like even something that's being like, because in those moments, I mean, if you think about, not to put anyone in that tough spot, but think about just the most recent thing that your kids did that made you just like kind of like
Mhm.
you can feel it, like you can crunch up into that ball, and you're like, my muscles are tight, and like I'm breathing up into my chest. I'm not really breathing that much at all, and so just even the pause button to be like, okay, soften the shoulders, relax the jaw, take 3 big deep breaths,
Mhm.
so helpful. And that's
Yeah.
just a little bit, letting that pressure out of the pressure cooker just a little bit so it doesn't go kaboom.
Yeah. I love that visual. That's really spot on. Yeah. I love that. Well, and one of the things too, I found your podcast because I have been having some health stuff. I mean, honestly, I think my whole life, but it's just gotten worse in the last year and still trying to figure out like what exactly it is. I think we're getting closer to an answer, but there were times where I couldn't even get out of bed, and then it's this like cycle of I don't feel good. I can't get out of bed. And so now I'm starting to feel more anxious because my husband has to do it all and I have to cancel on clients, and my kids are not going to get the healthy, nutritious dinner that I feel like I need to make for them. And so then I spiral on anxiety, which makes me feel even worse. And it's just this cycle that was happening for a while. And so I was just really trying to figure out like, what can I do as I'm laying in bed to stop this spiral of anxiety that is just like making it worse. And so I came across, I don't even know how I found your podcast. Honestly, I can't remember if I don't know. I don't know if I did a
You
Google
probably put
search.
some, like, keyword in the search bar. I feel like that's what most people tell me. They'll be
Probably.
like, "I put, like, anxious bedtime
I
meditation
probably
into the
did
search
actually.
bar." Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
then one meditation probably popped up.
yep. And so I'm assuming that's probably what it was because I don't know. Anyway, so I found your podcast, and the first one, whatever it was that I listened to, I don't even know what it was just so helpful to me in that moment that I was like, I need more of this. And so as I would start to feel better and be able to like go on walks more, I would listen to your podcast. I think you even had a couple that were like maybe walking meditations or outdoor ones or something. And I just found that really, by the time I got back from the walk, or by the time that I finished that 7-minute meditation, just laying in the dark in my bed, I was like, okay, I feel like I can go do one more thing right now. Like I can go, you know, finish the case note, or I can go do that client phone call, or I can go make dinner, or so I would love if you can share about like what causes that? Like, how does that actually help me feel better physically? Like, what is happening inside my body that is making me feel better?
Great question. My caveat, which you hear this all the time, Melissa, but definitely not a doctor here.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Sometimes on the podcast, I say, no facts, just fun here.
yeah.
But my understanding is there's a few different things going on. Physically, when you are meditating, there's a lot going on for your nervous system. So
Hmm.
you are moving out of that fight or flight and into more of that rest and digest. And when we aren't in an activated state, we just feel better. We all
Hmm.
know that feeling of just being in that activated state. So that's like a big component of it. Also, breathing. A lot of times, and you'll hear this like pretty much in all of the beginning of my podcast, is we'll either connect with our breath, take a few
Hmm.
big deep breaths, follow our breath, or maybe do a specific breath. I do this because it directly activates that rest and digest. It gets you out of fight or flight, but also because it helps to oxygenate the body and just connect with your breathing. So you're just breathing like better. You're just getting
Hmm.
more out of your breath, which makes a big difference. We're not meant to be like clenching our abdomen and taking these
Yeah.
short, shallow
Hmm.
breaths, but we do. Often that's our default. And so that's why I usually start with just even a few breaths, just gets people just like doing that low and slow breathing, which really helps, makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Also, on a neurological level, what's happening when you meditate is the amygdala, which is the pain, fear, worry, anxiety part of the brain, that begins to get quieter. That's the part of the brain that kicks off that fight or flight mechanism.
Yeah.
and it starts to get quieter. So they've done these really interesting like brain scans of people when they're meditating versus when they're not meditating. When you're meditating, the amygdala gets quieter, and then the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain just behind the forehead, there's
Mhm.
more activity there, and it gets kind of like more centered in that area. And that's a key region of the brain for some of the higher cognitive function, but memory, focus, and emotion regulation.
Mm.
So when we get more activity in that brain and less from the amygdala, we're basically rewiring our brain to have these smaller physiological responses to anxiety, stress, worry, and pain triggers, and then have a greater capacity for focus, memory, and also to manage our own emotions. So there's that piece as
Mhm.
well. There's also been some interesting studies in terms of like physical health as to what meditation does for pain. And I don't know anything about your health journey, and I'm certainly not asking you to like share any private information, but if any of it has been related to inflammation or pain, also like chronic pain and chronic fatigue are all
Mhm.
things, white blood cell count and the lymphatic system. Those are all things that have been studied, and how meditation can help support those things. Also, like heart health, blood pressure.
Yeah.
So, if any of those symptoms that you are
Yeah.
having, there's research out there saying that meditation can help support those things. Um, Also, like depression and anxiety.
For sure. Yeah.
I certainly don't believe that you should just like stop listening to your doctor and stop taking your medication and like
Sure.
meditate
Yeah.
away all your problems. Most of the studies say, with the exception, this one's actually really cool about prescription pain medication and meditation in those with chronic pain and fibromyalgia, is they did
Mhm.
some really interesting studies on looking at the effectiveness of the two. And they did find in some cases, as someone created a meditation practice, that they were able to wean off some of their prescription pain medications
Oh,
because
interesting.
of that work with the amygdala, because it basically wasn't firing as like fast, being like having a really big response to like the pain receptors. So
Yeah.
that's one that's been really interesting, to look at, is that research between like pain management, meditation, all of that.
That's cool.
Otherwise, most of the studies look at this approach, and they kind of conclude that like the sweet spot is kind of doing both, like
Mhm. Yeah.
doing what your doctors recommend, and then adding meditation into that is this really great complementary thing that you can do that's going to help you not only overall, but really help support some of those symptoms. Think of it as kind of from like the outside in and the inside out. That's what a lot
Yeah.
of the data supports, is it's kind of like the sweet spot is both. Like my mom's oncologist was saying, like, you know, don't not get chemo, but
Yeah.
while you're getting chemo and your white blood cell count is super, super, super low, he suggested basically acupuncture and meditation, especially during
Interesting.
that time, was
Yeah.
really supportive for her immune system. And 'cause that's another big one too, is immune system,
Yeah.
and then her white blood cell count. And this was, you know,
Years ago.
yeah, 18 years ago.
Yeah,
But
and
he
we
was
know so much
saying
more now.
so much more. But he was the first one who really said, like, acupuncture and meditation have been shown to be really supportive for the white blood cell count and also inflammation.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Well, I mean, it makes sense, and I feel like I feel it in my body.
Mhm.
And and also I'm still working with my doctor and all of that. But I just appreciate your podcast because I do feel like it has actually made a big difference for me as I am trying to figure out what's going on with me and giving me those little moments where like I can do something, right? And it's interesting because I do feel like there's a lot of people still who think, whether it's meditation or yoga or, whatever, that this is all just this woo woo stuff that is, just like, I don't know, like woo woo is the only word I can think of.
Yeah.
And I
It's like
just,
hippy dippy woo woo
yeah,
out there, pseudoscience,
right.
like,
But like, how do we get
yeah.
people to, what would you say to that? Because I personally don't think so, mostly
Yeah.
because I feel it in my body and I
Mhm.
experience it, right? And also I can still love Jesus and I don't
Yeah.
know what your stance is, but for me personally, like I can still love Jesus and know that this is helping my body and
Yeah.
that's okay. And so I
Oh,
just
can
am
we
curious,
talk
like,
about Jesus and meditation for a second? I
yes,
love
can we?
talking about
Okay,
this.
let's do
Yeah.
it.
I love talking about it because I get this question a lot. It came up a lot when I taught in that one bar, one Walmart town
Okay.
of Missouri, because you better believe there are a lot of people down with the
There's
big old
That's
God
right.
there.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
There's probably like 8 churches in that small town.
and they were all like very conservative Baptist.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were. one Walmart, handful of bars, a lot of churches.
Yeah.
So, and just for context, like I don't subscribe to any particular organized religion. I consider just
Mhm.
myself someone who has faith, but I don't, and this is not an invitation for anyone to come try to get me to join their church. Please don't. Um,
That's
that's just
fair.
my particular style is
Yeah.
like I'm someone who has faith, but I don't categorize it underneath a particular
Mhm.
religion. However, I have worked with so many different people, different walks of life, different faiths, different beliefs, and this comes up a lot is meditation against my religion, which is why I
Mm.
love to talk about it because I don't ever want anyone to do something that
Yeah.
they feel uncomfortable with. And that's the first
Yeah.
thing. Like if you're just truly uncomfortable with this, like please don't
Don't
do
do
it.
it. Yeah.
And also meditation is supposed to be this thing that's supposed to help make you feel better. And if
Yeah.
it's not, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Mhm.
If they're kind of just like curious, usually what I say, meditation itself is not a religious practice. It was started in because usually it's people who are part of like a Christian faith that usually bring this forward to me, this question.
Okay.
Um, and so meditation itself is like older than Christianity. So of course, if you go all the way back, you trace it all the way back, it is going to be in cultures where they weren't
Yeah.
Christian. And it also, it's older than Christianity. So yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's where kind of this misconception comes that meditation is like a religious practice. Like that is something that
Yeah.
like Buddhists do or
Sure.
that Hindus do. And that's not the case. Meditation itself, if you think of your mind as a light bulb, when we're walking around all day, the light's on, shining in directions, illuminating whatever we're doing. When we meditate, we're taking the light bulb and we're turning it into a laser. And we're going to take that laser and just point it at one thing. It's just
Mhm.
single point of concentration. That's it. You get to decide what you point your laser at. It could be your
Mhm.
breath. It could be a body scan. It could be the words of a guide in a guided meditation. It could be your devotional time. It could
Mhm.
be your
Mhm.
time with God. It could be your time reflecting on, what has Jesus put in my heart today? Whatever it is for you. All it is taking the light bulb, turning it. It's like a verb to meditate, right? Just like you
Mhm.
can walk with God or you can do these things. You could absolutely also meditate on God with God if you want. It also can
Mhm.
be completely the
Don't have to.
opposite.
Yeah.
You decide what you're going to point your laser at. And that's what I always tell people. Like, if you're truly uncomfortable with it, don't worry about it. Cause like,
Yeah.
don't let meditation make you feel worse by any means. But if you are curious about it, remember that you get to decide. You're completely in control as to what you point your laser at. And
Yeah.
if you're like, I am comfortable pointing my laser at a body scan or positive affirmations, but I'm not comfortable with a guided meditation that talks about the chakras, then don't point your laser in that
Yeah.
direction. You're completely in control as to what you point it at. And to me, to meditate itself is not like a religious thing, just like to
Right.
walk, to eat, to whatever you want to say. But you absolutely can weave them together if you
Yeah.
want.
I love that. That's perfect. Well, and I think that's the thing is like we do get to decide, and if it's not comfortable, then why would we do it, right?
Then
And
don't
I'm
do
and I
it.
don't need to try and
Yeah.
convince you to do it. I'm just
No.
saying like
Yes.
don't judge
And
me because it's working for me. So,
totally. And here's the flip side of that. I think to answer like your first question before we went, but I love talking the opportunity to talk about meditation and Jesus because I think it's a common misconception and I like
yeah,
to
for sure.
just kind of debunk that a little bit. When people say, and it's always like, how do I get my husband to meditate? He's so uptight. Or it's like, how do I get my teenager to meditate? They're so anxious. And all of these things are so well meaning. Like I also look at my dad who like doesn't have like great heart health and some
Uh-huh.
of these, just some things where I'm like, Dad, like meditation and yoga would be so good for you. Like I know someone who can help you with that.
I know a
We all
podcast.
know, yeah, I'm like, Dad, free resource here. But we all know someone where we have the best intentions and we kind of look at them and we think meditation, mindfulness, yoga, or any combination of the three could be really good for you.
Yeah.
And you're probably not wrong. You're probably not wrong. However, what I will say is the best way to get someone to explore it, never tell someone to do it. That never works.
Yeah.
Um, it's either talk about what it's done for you. That's
Mhm.
good. And just be like, hey, Dad, I was reading this book and it was talking all about just like meditation and heart health. And it was just really interesting. And I learned these few things. I just thought you would think it was interesting.
Mhm.
right? You can do that. There's no ask, there's no burden of, now do it, but just that's good. But what's better is they will see the changes in you and that
Mhm.
will probably inspire them to want to do it. So whether it
Yeah.
even be like with yoga, like a physical change, a lot of clients that I've worked with or students I've worked with, as they get older and they feel like they're getting a little bit more like stiff, creak. I mean, even at 34, I'm like, just this morning, I was getting up off the floor playing dinosaurs with pork chop, and I was like, "Oh, I'm
Oh,
feeling a little
wow. Yep.
stiff." Yeah, I'm like, the floor didn't used to be that hard.
Yep.
Um, those things, and so then maybe their partners might be like, "Oh, you're really, like, getting around easier," and they're like, "Yeah, like, yoga's really great for your joints," and I just have found since I've been doing it a couple times a week that the stairs are easier for me, right?
Yeah.
And so then they might see those changes in you, or, like, for your kids or your teens. I had
Mhm.
this someone come on a retreat and she called herself Zen Jen. It was her second retreat because she was like, "Well, my kids started calling me Zen Jen when I came back because I'm usually like yelling at them." They're like this big Italian family. And she's like, "I'm usually
Yeah.
like yelling at them, being like, ah." And they're like, "Mom, you just came home and you're so peaceful. You're like Zen Jen. Can you go on more retreats?" But it just like,
Can you go away more?
yeah, can you, like, whatever you just did to do
Yeah,
more
do
of
it more.
that? Yeah, and they were, like, teenagers, so course,
Totally.
they're, like, giving her a
Yeah.
hard time being like, "Oh, Zen Jen's back." But, like, even that, like, if you're anxious or you're having a hard time or feeling like you're wound really tightly and that's maybe impacting, I mean, our kids see it. Even my
Yeah.
four-year-old, I feel like he
Totally. They
unintentionally just,
feel
like,
our
roasts
energy.
me to filth sometimes, just
Yeah.
being so honest. But they'll see those changes in you and they'll be like, "Huh, mom seems happier. I
Yeah.
wonder what she's doing." That's really the way, is just let it be whatever it is to you. And as you start to change, it will inspire the others around you
Yeah.
to change if they're open
That's
to it.
good. Yeah, that's good. Well, and that's how it is with our kids too, like we lead by example and we
Yeah.
model and, all of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's cool. Well, I just realized what time it is. I don't know how this always happens to me, but I love talking. And so I'm like,
Oh,
shoot,
I have extra time if you have
we
extra
gotta
time. If
wrap
there's more
things up.
if there's more you want to talk about, Melissa, I have some
No,
extra
I
time.
know. I feel like we would just keep going and then I would, get in trouble with missing clients and all of that,
Oh,
but
yeah, we can't do that. No, we
we
can't
don't
do
need that.
that.
But before we go, I am curious if you could share, obviously, I would like to say that your podcast is a resource for families and caregivers, as they are trying to just calm their nervous system and find their own healing, and even for their kids. But besides that, what would 3 resources be that you would recommend for caregivers as they are, maybe exploring this?
Your local yoga studio, one, because we
Okay.
love to support local businesses.
Yeah.
Definitely, we love that. But if you're curious, just look up a local yoga studio. Almost all of them have some kind of a first class free or some
Beginners.
kind of
Yeah.
an entry.
Hmm.
Yeah, beginners, your first week's $10, something like that. It's low stakes. And if you're just curious, and I feel like I mean, even in this one bar, or 3 bar, one Walmart, 5 church town, there was
Yeah.
a yoga studio. Like, there's something, or your YMCA, something. Just take yourself on a little date and try yoga. That's one
Just
thing.
try it.
Just
Yeah.
try it. Just try it. A beginner's, a slow flow, a restorative, something like that.
Okay.
Just give it a whirl. See what you think. And then you're also supporting a local business, which we love.
Totally. We love that.
Totally love that. Um, Also, I think anywhere, so there's a lot of great guided meditations. Like, of course, you've been so generous, Melissa, calling mine out, but also like Insight Timer has a free option where
Oh,
there's a lot of free
yeah.
tracks. You can, like, on YouTube, there's a lot of free, because
Yeah.
the thing that's really about guided meditations is finding someone whose style and voice resonates with you.
Hmm.
Like their voice, like their actual voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you might find that you like like maybe you prefer like more of like a male voice versus a female voice, or
Sure.
someone with like
Yeah.
an accent or not, or um and so just dabble. Just go online, free resources. Also, This is maybe not super specific, but I think a great resource that I have stumbled across is there's an OT, an occupational therapist that's
Hmm.
local to me. And she does like nature-based occupational therapy.
Oh,
And
cool.
she's really great. And she has some resources and is just really great at educating. And it's called Earth Mama, EARTHMOMMA. Her name's Amber.
Okay.
She's delightful and she's great. And since you mentioned that maybe a lot of your listeners maybe have like some neurospicy kids or like
Yeah.
sensory need kids, like I'm double neurodivergent. So like, are my kids probably going to be a little, yeah,
Yeah.
probably. Um, so that's something too that I think Amber's work is
Okay.
really great. And so
Yeah.
for any of the listeners, and she does a lot of work to help like support nervous systems and things like that, specifically in kids that may need some of that
Oh,
extra
cool. Okay.
support. So I don't know,
Oh,
that just came to mind.
I love it. Okay. Those are great. And I will put all of those in the show notes. I'll put your book in the show notes. I
Oh,
feel bad. I didn't know you had a book. So
well,
I'm
I'll send you a
excited about
copy.
that.
Yeah, I'll send you one.
Okay, cool. And yeah, I'll put all the things we talked about. We have a local yoga studio here in where I live in a pretty small town,
Mhm.
in Eastern Washington. We have a college, and so it's like small during the summer and then big during the school year when all the students are here.
Yeah,
But we have a local studio, yoga studio, and I just recently did a sound bath and some breath work there, and like a workshop that they had, and it was like the best thing ever. And I
yeah.
cannot wait for the next one. But yeah, it was just like me taking a step out there and saying, I'm going to just try it. I've never done it before.
Just
I'm going to
try
try
it.
it. And it was amazing.
Yeah,
So that is my encouragement to people. Like, it's not going to hurt. My teenage daughter came with me. She did not enjoy
mhm.
the breathwork part. And so she just laid there during that
Yeah.
part. And you can do that. And nobody said anything to her and
It's all
nobody
optional. No
noticed.
one cares.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she loved the sound bath. So yeah, like you get to do what you want to do. So anyway, I love that.
Amazing.
So,
Amazing.
well, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for all you're doing. And it was so cool to meet you. I said before we recorded, like, I feel like I'm meeting a celebrity, and I just, still feel that way. So,
Oh my gosh. Well, good. I'm glad I didn't lose the shimmer since you got to talk to
no,
me. You're not like, oh
zero.
gosh, and that bozo, I'm not listening to her podcast again.
No way, man. Yeah. So, anyway, well, I appreciate you. Thank you for all you do and have a super
Oh,
fabulous day.
you too. Thank you so much for
Thank
having me.
you. Yep.